Welcome back to the abandoned post. We're now reading you stories from the medical unknown. Hospitals, places of healing and hope, can also be breeding grounds for the strange and inexplicable. We've scoured the depths of Reddit, those digital corners where the veil thins, and we've unearthed 3 chilling tales. These aren't your typical ghost stories. These are accounts from people who experience something creepy within the sterile walls of hospitals. So, dim the lights, settle in, and get ready to hear some truly unsettling accounts. And before we begin, we're curious, where in the world are you listening from? Let us know in the comments below. We love to see how far these stories travel. Story number 1. They see what we don't. The whispers from Pediatric Ward 3. Hey everyone, long-time lurker, first-time poster. I've always been fascinated by the stories here, the ones that make the hairs on your neck stand up. I never thought I'd have one of my own to share, let alone one that's kept me awake for weeks. For the past 5 years, I've worked as a night nurse at St. Jude's Children's Hospital. It's a tough job, heartbreaking at times, but also incredibly rewarding. You see the resilience of kids, the unwavering support of families, and sometimes, just sometimes, little miracles happen. But there's another side to it, a quiet, unsettling undercurrent that I can't shake. It revolves around the children, specifically those in Pediatric Ward 3, and the things they say they see, things the adults don't. It started subtly. Little Timmy, all of 6 years old and battling leukemia, kept pointing to the corner of his room, a corner that was always empty. He'd whisper about the tall man with no face standing there, just watching. We'd reassure him, tell him it was his imagination, maybe a shadow playing tricks. Kids have vivid imaginations, right? We brushed it off. Then there was Lily, a sweet 8-year-old recovering from a bad fall. She'd draw pictures, not of flowers or puppies, but of shadowy figures with long spindly fingers reaching out. When asked who they were, she'd simply say, "They visit when the lights go out. They want to play." Play what, Lily? We never got a clear answer. At first it seemed like isolated incidents, sad perhaps, the anxieties of sick children manifesting in strange ways. But then it started happening more frequently, with different children, and the descriptions, they started to align in ways that made my blood run cold. One night, little Mateo, who was barely 4, and couldn't form complex sentences, kept repeating the clicking lady behind the curtain. She's sad. There was no one behind the curtain. I checked multiple times. The clicking sound, we couldn't hear anything. But Mateo was terrified, his little body trembling. The descriptions were always vague enough to be dismissed individually, but collectively, they painted a disturbing picture. Tall, faceless figures, whispering voices no one else could hear, cold spots in the room that defied the hospital's climate control, and the eyes. Several children mentioned the eyes, not seeing them clearly, but feeling them, intense and watchful, even in the dark. One of the most unsettling accounts came from a 12-year-old named Sarah. Sarah was a bright, articulate girl, recovering from surgery. She wasn't prone to fantasy. One afternoon, she called me over, her face pale. "Nurse Emily," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "there's a little girl sitting on the edge of Michael's bed. She's all gray, and her eyes, they're like buttons, sewn on wrong. She keeps humming a song, but it sounds broken." Michael, a 7-year-old with a severe infection, was asleep and completely alone in his room. I rushed in. Nothing, no gray girl, no humming. But Sarah was adamant. She even started crying, begging me to make the button-eyed girl go away. What made this particular incident so chilling was that a few weeks prior, another child in the same ward, a 5-year-old named Ben, had described seeing a gray girl with bumpy eyes standing in the corner, bumpy eyes, not exactly buttons, but terrifyingly similar. He'd also mentioned a faint, off-key humming. We started keeping a log, a secret one, just the night staff. We documented these encounters, the children's descriptions, the dates and times. We tried to find logical explanations, medication side effects, fever-induced hallucinations, the stress of being in a hospital, but the consistency in some of the details was unnerving. There was the recurring mention of the shadows that aren't shadows. Children would point to areas where there was no light source, yet they described dark, shifting shapes. One little boy, Leo, insisted that the shadow by his closet had too many arms. Too many arms. What does a child even imagine that? And the whispers, oh God, the whispers. Several children, at different times and in different rooms, reported hearing faint whispers when the ward was completely silent. They couldn't make out the words, just a low, murmuring sound that seemed to come from the walls themselves. One child, a usually cheerful toddler, named Maya, started covering her ears and crying, saying, "The quiet voices are talking about me." The most disturbing account, the one that truly made me question everything, involved a 10-year-old boy named Ethan. Ethan was terminally ill, and we all knew his time was limited. He was often weak and drowsy, but one clear night, he looked straight at me, his eyes wide with a strange mix of fear and resignation. "They're here again, Nurse Emily," he whispered, his voice raspy. "The still ones. They stand at the end of the bed. They don't move. They just watch. They're waiting." "Waiting for what, Ethan?" I asked gently, trying to keep my voice steady. He just looked at me, his gaze distant. "For us to be like them." A few days later, Ethan passed away. After that, the atmosphere in Ward 3 felt different, heavier, colder. The other nurses felt it too. We started noticing things. A faint, almost imperceptible clicking sound in the quiet hours, fleeting shadows in our peripheral vision, a general sense of unease that we couldn't explain. One night, I was doing my rounds. The ward was quiet, the only sound the gentle beeping of monitors. As I passed Lily's room, I heard a faint humming. It was off-key, almost discordant, just like she had described. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I slowly pushed the door open. Lily was asleep, her breathing shallow. The room was still, but the humming, it was still there, faint but present, seeming to emanate from the corner of the room. The empty corner. I backed out of the room, my hand trembling. I told myself it was my imagination, the stress getting to me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I had heard something I wasn't supposed to. Another time, I was checking on Mateo. He was awake, staring intently at the ceiling. "What are you looking at, sweetie?" I asked softly. He pointed a tiny finger. "The cracks. They move." I looked at the ceiling. Just normal, stationary cracks in the plaster. "They're not moving, Mateo." He shook his head vehemently. "Yes, they wiggle. They're trying to reach me." It's gotten to the point where the night shifts in Ward 3 feel different. I find myself constantly looking over my shoulder. Every creak of the old building, every flicker of the lights sends a shiver down my spine. I've started noticing things too. A fleeting glimpse of something tall in the corner of my eye. A whisper that seems to fade away as soon as I focus on it. A sudden drop in temperature in certain rooms. I know how this sounds. A stressed night nurse letting her imagination run wild. But I swear, there's something going on in Ward 3. These children, in their innocence and vulnerability, are seeing or sensing something that we, as adults, are blind to. And their descriptions, though fragmented and childlike, are painting a picture that is growing increasingly terrifying. Has anyone else experienced anything like this? Working in hospitals, particularly with children, seeing things that can't be explained, hearing things that aren't there. I need to know I'm not going crazy. I need to know if anyone else has witnessed these whispers from the pediatric ward. I'm hesitant to go into more detail about some of the other incidents, some of the more graphic descriptions the children have given. They're etched in my mind,
and just thinking about them makes me feel sick. But if anyone is interested, if anyone has similar stories, I might be willing to share more. Just be warned, once you hear these whispers, you can't unhear them, and once you start to believe, the shadows seem to get a little bit longer. Stay safe, everyone, and if you have kids in the hospital, maybe, just maybe, listen a little closer to what they say they see in the quiet hours. You might be surprised and terrified by what you hear.
Story number 2. The silent shift. When the only help available isn't listed on the roster. Hey everyone, long-time reader here. I've always been fascinated by the stories shared in this corner of the internet. The ones that make you double-check the shadows and listen a little too closely to the silence. Tonight I have a story of my own, something that's been happening during my night shifts at St. Augustine's Hospital, and it's starting to seriously creep me out. It involves the kind of help you get when you least expect it, from people who shouldn't be there at all. St. Augustine's is an older facility, much like many of the hospitals you hear stories about. It has that distinct smell of antiseptic, mixed with a faint mustiness, and the kind of quiet at night that makes every creak and groan of the building sound like a footstep behind you. I've been a night nurse here for about 3 years now, and for the most part, things have been normal, busy, sometimes stressful, but normal. Until recently, it started with small things, the kind of things you could easily dismiss as exhaustion or a trick of the light. To a colleague mentioning a nurse they didn't recognize assisting during a particularly hectic code blue, only to vanish when things calmed down. Older woman, very calm, Ben from the ICU had said, knew exactly what to do. Then she was just gone. I asked around. No one knew her. We chalked it up to a floater we hadn't been introduced to. Then it happened to me. It was a few weeks ago, around 2 a.m. We had a patient, Mrs. Davies, an elderly woman with severe respiratory distress. Her oxygen levels were plummeting, and I was struggling to get a good IV line established. I was feeling the pressure, my hands a little shaky. Suddenly, a voice, soft but firm, spoke beside me. Try the cephalic vein, just above the wrist. Use a 22 gauge. I turned to see a woman standing there. She was wearing a white nurse's uniform that looked, the fabric seemed a bit thicker, the style almost old-fashioned. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her eyes held a deep, knowing sadness. Before I could ask who she was, she gestured gently towards Mrs. Davies' arm. Hesitantly, I followed her instructions, and the IV went in, smooth as silk. On the first try, relief washed over me. I looked up to thank the nurse, but she was no longer there. I scanned the small room, no other staff. I could have sworn she was just beside me. I asked the other nurses on duty if they had seen anyone matching her description. No one had. After that night, I started paying closer attention, and I began to hear similar stories from other night staff. Mark, a seasoned respiratory therapist, told me about a doctor he'd never seen before appearing during a critical intubation, offering a crucial piece of advice that helped stabilize the patient. When Mark turned to acknowledge him, the doctor had simply disappeared. No one on the day staff recognized his description either. The details were always a little off, a little hazy. The uniforms sometimes looked dated. The individuals themselves were always focused, efficient, and utterly silent, unless offering specific, crucial instructions. They never engaged in small talk, never introduced themselves properly, and they always seemed to vanish without a trace, as if they were never truly there at all. One of the most unsettling accounts came from a young CNA, Emily. She was doing her rounds on the 3rd floor, which is mostly long-term care. An elderly patient, Mr. Abernathy, who is mostly non-verbal and bedridden, had somehow managed to get his call light on. When Emily went in, he was agitated,
and trying to point towards the bathroom. Emily was struggling to understand what he needed when a figure appeared in the doorway. It was a man in what looked like an old-style orderly uniform, a faded blue. He moved with a quiet efficiency, went straight to the bathroom, and adjusted the airflow from a small vent near the floor. Mr. Abernathy immediately calmed down and settled back in bed. Emily turned to thank the orderly, but he was gone. She searched the hallway, the nurse's station. No one had seen him. We started a quiet, unofficial log in the break room, jotting down these strange encounters. The descriptions varied slightly, but there were common threads: a sense of calm competence, an almost ethereal presence, and the inexplicable disappearances, the feeling that they weren't quite solid. One night, I was charting in a quiet corner of the ICU. A particularly fragile patient had just been admitted, and the atmosphere was tense. I felt a sudden chill in the air, even though the temperature in the room was regulated. When I looked up, a nurse was standing a few feet away, watching the monitors with a serene expression. She was wearing a white dress uniform with a starched cap, something I'd only ever seen in old photographs of the hospital. "His respirations are becoming shallow," she said softly, her gaze never leaving the screen. "Increase the FiO2 to 60% and prepare for potential proning." Before I could even process what was happening, the monitor alarm started beeping, just as she had indicated. I reacted instantly, following her unspoken instructions. The patient stabilized. I turned to ask her name, to thank her for the timely warning, but she was gone, vanished into thin air. I felt a profound sense of unease, a cold dread that settled deep in my bones. Later I described the nurse's uniform to some of the older staff members. Mrs. Gable, who has been at St. Augustine's for over 40 years, looked troubled. "That sounds like Nurse Eleanor," she said quietly. "She worked here in the 40s. A dedicated nurse, lost her life in a fire that broke out in this very unit. A fire in the ICU decades ago. Since then, the encounters have continued, sporadic but always in moments of need. A doctor appearing in the OR to hand a crucial instrument at just the right moment, then fading away as the surgery progresses. A gentle hand guiding a confused patient back to their room in the dead of night. The person attached to that hand nowhere to be found moments later. They never speak unless it's directly related to patient care. They never introduce themselves. They simply appear, offer assistance with an almost preternatural knowledge of what's required, and then disappear back into the silence of the hospital night. It's hard not to feel like we're being helped by something else, something tied to this place, perhaps the lingering spirits of those who dedicated their lives to healing within these walls. The thought is both a comfort and a terror. Comforting to know that there's a silent, watchful presence. Terrifying to realize that the help we're receiving might not be from the living. We've learned to recognize the signs, the sudden chill, the fleeting glimpse of an unfamiliar uniform. We've started calling them the silent staff among ourselves. They always seem to know what you need, often before you even realize it yourself. It's as if they can sense the urgency, the specific crisis unfolding. I don't know what they are, these fleeting figures in the periphery of our busy nights. Ghosts, residual energy, some kind of collective hallucination brought on by stress and exhaustion. Whatever the explanation, the encounters are becoming more frequent, and the sense of unease is growing. Have any of you who work in hospitals, especially older ones, experienced anything similar? Have you ever encountered a colleague who seemed to appear out of nowhere and vanish just as quickly, leaving behind a feeling that something wasn't quite right? I need to know if St. Augustine's is unique in this, or if there are other hospitals where the living share their shifts with the departed. The next time you're in a hospital late at night and an unfamiliar face offers a helping hand, take a moment to really look. You might be surprised by who or what is offering assistance in the silent shift. Stay safe, everyone, and be mindful of the unseen hands that guide us in the darkness.
Story number 3. The stillness in the corner isn't still anymore. Or I don't know why I'm writing this. Maybe to feel less alone. Maybe because typing it out makes it feel, I don't know, real. In a way, I can almost process. Or maybe I'm just losing my mind and need someone, anyone, to tell me this is normal. Or that they've felt it too. Please, just hear me out. This is long, I know, but I need to get it all down. It started subtly. You know that feeling, right? To the one you get late at night. Maybe when you're reading or scrolling on your phone, and the house is quiet, except for the hum of the fridge or the wind outside. That little prickle on the back of your neck, the sudden urge to glance over your shoulder, the distinct, irrational certainty that you're not actually alone. For years, that's all it was for me. A fleeting sensation. I'd be in my bedroom, door closed, maybe studying for college exams back then, or later, unwinding after a long day at work. Suddenly, bam, eyes darting to the darkest corner of the room. Heart giving a little jump. I'd scan the space, see nothing but familiar shapes. The laundry hamper, the bookshelf, the way shadows played tricks under the desk. I'd take a deep breath, maybe chuckle nervously, and tell myself it was just fatigue, or an overactive imagination fueled by too many horror movies or creepy internet stories. It's just the house settling, right? Just the wind, just my brain being weird. I live alone now, moved into this small, older apartment about 2 years ago. It's got character, I guess. Creaky floorboards, windows that rattle a bit in storms. The usual stuff. My bedroom isn't huge, but it's my sanctuary. Bed against one wall, desk against the other, a closet, and that one corner, the one diagonally opposite my bed. It's always been the darkest spot, even with the lamp on. Something about the way the light hits, or doesn't hit. The feeling started coming back more often here. At first I blamed the new environment. Old buildings make noises. Fine, but this was different. It wasn't just a random prickle anymore. It was more focused. It felt like whatever it was always in that corner. The feeling wasn't just someone is here. It was someone is there, watching. I tried to rationalize. Maybe it's infrasound from the building's old pipes. Maybe a weird draft. I can't pinpoint. I bought heavier curtains, thinking maybe headlights sweeping past were creating subconscious triggers. I checked for carbon monoxide leaks, thinking maybe I was hallucinating slightly. Everything checked out normal, but the feeling intensified. It went from a once-a-week spook to a nightly occurrence. The moment the sun went down, and I was settled in my room, the sensation would creep in. It wasn't aggressive, not yet. It was just present, a heavy, silent awareness pressing in from that corner. It felt like holding your breath, waiting for something. Then came the secondary stuff. Little things you could easily explain away on their own, but together they started painting a picture I didn't want to see. It started with sounds, not loud bangs or anything dramatic, just small noises, a soft scritch from the corner, like a mouse, but there were never any droppings, a faint rustling, like fabric moving, even when the air was perfectly still. Sometimes, late at night, when everything was dead quiet, I'd hold my own breath and strain my ears, and I could almost swear I heard something else breathing, shallow, slow, almost inaudible. I told myself it was my own blood, rushing in my ears, the sound of my own body, but it didn't feel like it was coming from inside me. It felt like it was coming from the corner. Then my eyes started playing tricks. You know peripheral vision, how you catch movement out of the corner of your eye. It started happening constantly. Flickers of shadow, dark shapes that seemed to dart back
Just as I turned my head, I'd whip around, flashlight app ready on my phone, and shine it into the corner. Nothing, just the wall, the baseboard, the faint texture of the paint, but the feeling of being watched would be immense. In those moments, thick and suffocating, I started losing sleep. How could I relax when every nerve ending was screaming that something was standing silently, just feet away, hidden in the shadows? I'd lie in bed, facing away from the corner, eyes squeezed shut, trying to force myself to sleep, but I could feel the gaze. It felt cold, analytical, like I was an insect under a magnifying glass. Sometimes I'd roll over suddenly, trying to catch it, but there was never anything there, just that oppressive presence. One night, about 6 months ago, things escalated. I woke up suddenly around 3 a.m., pitch black, dead silent, but the feeling was overwhelming. It wasn't just in the corner anymore. It felt closer, like it was standing right beside my bed. I was frozen, absolutely paralyzed with a fear so primal. It felt like ice water flooding my veins. I couldn't move, couldn't scream, couldn't even breathe properly. My eyes were wide open, staring into the darkness towards the ceiling, too terrified to turn my head.
I could feel it. I can't explain how, but I knew it was leaning over me. I felt a distinct coldness wash over my face, like someone breathing icy air. And then I felt a pressure, not a hand, not exactly, more like the weight of its attention, like invisible fingers tracing the outline of my face, my arm. It wasn't painful, but it was violating on a level I can't describe. It lasted for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 30 seconds. Then, the coldness receded, the feeling of immediate proximity lessened, retreating back towards the corner. I lay there, shaking uncontrollably, until the first hint of dawn crept through the gap in my curtains. Only then could I move. I scrambled out of bed, flicked on every light, heart pounding like a drum machine. I searched the room frantically. Nothing. Windows locked, door shut, nothing disturbed, nothing out of place, except me. I was a wreck. I started avoiding my bedroom. I'd work late, stay out, even sleep on the uncomfortable couch in the living room some nights. But it didn't really help. The feeling would still sometimes bleed out, a faint echo in the hallway, a sense of being watched even through the closed bedroom door. And sleeping on the couch just meant I was exhausted and even more on edge. I tried everything I could think of. Burning sage. The room just smelled smoky. The feeling remained. Putting salt lines across the doorway and windows felt foolish. Did nothing. Till I even bought a small crucifix and hung it on the wall opposite the corner. Despite not being particularly religious, it felt defiant. I guess the feeling didn't go away, but maybe, just maybe, it felt slightly less intense right near the cross. Or was that just wishful thinking? Just subtle stuff kept happening. My desk faces away from the corner. Sometimes I'd be working, deeply focused, and get that intense prickle. I'd slowly turn my chair, dread coiling in my stomach. Tamed. A pen that was definitely in the middle of the desk would now be right on the edge, about to fall. Or a book I hadn't touched in days would be slightly askew on the shelf in the corner. Tiny, insignificant movements, plausible deniability cranked up to 11. Maybe I bumped the desk, maybe vibrations from the street, but it always happened when the feeling was strongest. Then came the whispers. This started about 2 months ago. It's not like voices talking to me. Not directly. It's more like overhearing a conversation from another room. Muffled and indistinct. It happens when I'm right on the edge of sleep, or sometimes when I'm just sitting in silence, trying to read. It sounds like sibilant, hushed tones, just below the threshold of understanding. It seems to emanate from the corner, though I can never make out words. Just the cadence, the faint hissing quality. It makes my skin crawl.
It feels ancient and malevolent. Last week was the worst yet. I had finally drifted off to sleep in my bed, exhausted after days of hypervigilance. I had left my bedside lamp on, hoping the light would offer some protection. I woke up for no reason. The lamp was off. I definitely hadn't turned it off. My heart started hammering. The room was plunged into near darkness. Only faint moonlight filtering through the curtains. In the corner, it wasn't empty. I couldn't see details. It wasn't like a person standing there. It was more like, to the darkness in the corner, was deeper, thicker, and shaped, taller than me, vaguely humanoid, but too thin, limbs too long. Maybe it wasn't solid, more like solidified shadow, absorbing the faint light. It wasn't moving, just standing there, observing. The feeling wasn't just being watched anymore, it was being seen, completely, utterly exposed. Every fear, every vulnerability laid bare. To the air in the room was freezing cold, my breath pluming faintly. To the silence was absolute, broken only by the frantic pounding in my chest. I don't know how long I stared. Time ceased to exist. I was trapped in that moment, eyes locked on the impossible shape in the corner. I wanted to scream, to run, to turn on the light switch by the door, but my body wouldn't obey. It was pure, unadulterated terror. Then slowly, almost imperceptibly, it seemed to recede, not by walking away, but by fading, thinning out, melting back into the ambient shadows of the corner. It's gone, just like that, leaving behind only the bone-chilling cold and the lingering echo of its presence. The lamp still wouldn't turn on. The bulb had blown. Coincidence, maybe, but I didn't sleep again that night. I sat huddled on my bed, phone flashlight trained on the corner, until sunrise. I haven't slept in my bedroom since. I've been crashing on the couch, lights blazing in the living room all night. I keep the bedroom door shut tight, wedged a chair under the knob, but I can still feel it, even now. Sitting here typing this, I feel its attention focused on that door. The silence from the other side feels heavy, watchful. I don't know what it is, a ghost, a demon, some kind of interdimensional thing, or am I genuinely having a prolonged psychotic break? The problem is, it feels too real, too consistent. The cold, the sounds, the feeling, it's not random, it's intelligent, it's patient, and it's focused on me. Why me? Why this room? Was it here before I moved in? Did I bring it with me somehow? I've tried researching the history of the building, found nothing unusual, no tragic deaths, no occult happenings that I can find records of. It just is. I'm scared. I'm scared to be in my own home. I'm scared to sleep. I'm scared of what happens next. Will it touch me again? Will it speak? Will I see it more clearly? Every creak of the floorboards makes me jump. Every shadow seems to writhe. Does anyone else experience this? Not just the fleeting feeling, but this persistent, escalating presence. This feeling of being watched by something unseen. Something that slowly makes itself known. What is it? And more importantly, how do I make it stop? Can I even make it stop? I feel like it's waiting, patiently, in the corner. It knows I have to sleep eventually. It knows I can't keep the lights on forever. It knows that sooner or later, I'll have to go back into that room. The stillness in the corner isn't still anymore. It's aware, it's waiting, and I think it's getting stronger. Or maybe I'm just getting weaker. Please, if you have any advice, any similar experiences, I need to know I'm not alone in this. Because right now, being alone is the most terrifying thing in the world, especially when I know, deep down, that I'm not really alone at all, not anymore.
And there you have it, 3 creepy tales from the heart of the medical world. These stories remind us that even in places dedicated to healing, the unexplained can lurk in the shadows, leaving us with more questions than answers. We hope these stories have given you a thrill, and perhaps a shiver or two. The world is full of mysteries, and we'll continue to explore them, one spine-chilling account at a time. If you enjoyed these stories, and want to hear more tales from the strange and supernatural, be sure to hit that like button And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more unsettling narratives delivered straight to your feed. Your support helps us keep digging into the darkness. Thanks for listening, and remember to keep one eye open. You never know what might be lurking just beyond the edge of perception.